Hello, welcome to Genesis, Creation as It Didn't Happen, Part 3. So, now, Abraham the liar and his equally deceitful wife Sarai have taken up residence in Canaan, and Lot has established himself on the plain of the Jordan, erecting his tent near the city of Sodom. Unknown to him, of course, is the fact that he has just made a considerable geographical error. Being anywhere near Sodom is extremely bad for one's health, or at least it will be shortly. The men of Sodom, Genesis tells us, were wicked and sinners before the Lord. One must, I suppose, presume that the women of Sodom were also wicked and sinners, though in typical biblical fashion, well, they aren't mentioned. I mean, they're only women, so why mention the goats or the sheep? I mean, well, the women, they're on the same level. But before getting around to actually smiting anybody over that, and remember, God has actually promised not to smite anybody else after the flood episode, he does one of his do something again that he's already done things. After Lot leaves, God tells Abram to look from the place where he is, northward and southward, eastward and westward, and says he will give it to Abram and to his seed forever, and he will make his seed as the dust of the earth. He tells Abram to walk the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it unto thee, he says. Now, hang on a minute. He's already said that back in 12:7. Unto thy seed will I give this land. Abram already knows he and his seed are getting this land, but just in case he's forgotten, God is telling him all over again. Abram then moves his tent down to Hebron, and he builds another altar to the Lord. Now, we get some pretty heavy-duty smiting. Now, none of it by God this time. No, the humans are smiting each other. The kings of Shinar, Elisar, and Elam have a go at the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela. And after various machinations, Ashtaroth gets smitten, and the Zuzims and the Emins get smitten by somebody or other. And then all the country of the Amalekites gets smitten along with the Amorites. I mean, we don't want to leave out the Amorites, so we'll smite them too. Then all these kings have a great battle, lots of people get killed, and after all that, Lot and his people, who are now dwelling in Sodom, are captured, and they're taken away, along with all his goods. But when Abram gets news of this, well, he's really pissed off by that. And he gathers all his servants, 318 of them, arms them, and he goes after the abductors, pursuing them into Dan. Abram attacks them by night, and yes, he smote them. Having smitten them, he chases the remainder of them to the left hand of Damascus, whatever that actually means. Abram then brings back all the goods, and his brother Lot, and his goods, and his people. Oh, and he brings the women back as well. They were lucky. This is the Bible after all, so not being very important, they could have just been overlooked. The king of Sodom meets them, and everybody's happy, and there's a lot of various things going on. But a few pages later, God does it again. He makes a covenant with Abram and tells him that, yes, unto his seed he has given all this land, yada, yada, yada. How many times does he have to say this? Is Abram suffering from memory loss and needs reminding, or does God just not remember having mentioned it twice already? All right, we get it. Abram's seed inherit the land. But there is still that little tiny problem of Abram not having anywhere to actually put his seed in order to produce those who will inherit it, since his wife is barren. Big problem. But Sarai has a brainwave. Oh no, this is an intelligent woman. Her own womb doesn't work, but she has an Egyptian handmaid named Hagar. And her womb, we must assume, works perfectly well. So Sarai says to her husband, I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. Abram, we are told, hearkened to the voice of Sarai. I'm sure he did. His wife has just told him she has no problem with his sleeping around. And if he's going to produce enough offspring to populate an entire country, I should think he's going to have quite a fun time of it, or wear himself out trying. Having lied and cheated with Pharaoh, pretending that Sarai was Abram's sister rather than his wife, this oh-so-moral pair now decide to indulge in adultery, Sarai egging her husband on to commit it. They really are not an outstanding example of morality or of anything approaching family values. though God seems to think they're just fine. And of course, nobody thinks they need to see how Hagar feels about it. I mean, she's just a slave. Fetch me a drink, Hagar. Bring me a new dress, Hagar. I fancy some dates, Hagar. Make a few babies with my husband, Hagar. It's all part of the day's work. Well, maybe a night's work. And all perfectly correct and morally justified, because this pair of proven cheats and liars are God's favourites. He has a very poor taste in favourites. So, Abram basically rapes Hagar. She hasn't consented to sex with him after all, and we are told that when she discovers she's pregnant, she despises Sarai. That seems a pretty normal reaction to me on her part. After all, Sarai has caused her to be raped by an 86-year-old man, and now she has the result of it to carry around for 9 months and have the pain of giving birth to it. But Sarai is annoyed by this. She thinks she's hard done by, despised by the woman she has had raped. I mean, why is Hagar complaining about it? So unreasonable, this woman. But Abram, noble and just and good as ever, tells her, "Thy maid is thine hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee." Lovely man. So Sarai, we are told, dealt hardly with her, and Hagar fled. Something she probably should have done a bit sooner, like, before the rape thing. But the angel of the Lord, he descends and he finds her. He asks her what she's doing, and she tells him she's running away from her mistress who has been cruel to her. But the angel of the Lord tells her, "Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands." Yes, go back, let her beat you some more for not liking having been raped, and you can be raped again and again and again and again to help good old Abram populate his country. Yeah, what great advice. The angel of the Lord had pretty poor rape counseling skills, if you ask me. He also tells her that he will multiply her seed exceedingly, that it would not be numbered for multitude. And to begin with, she will have a son, who will be a wild man, and everybody will hate him. Like that's supposed to make her feel better. And she doesn't even get to name the child she will have to give birth to, the angel telling her to call him Ishmael. Well, when Abram is 99 years old, and presumably having been doing some pretty heavy begetting, the Lord comes to him, and he tells him that his name shall no more be Abram, which meant something like exalted father. For now he will be called Abraham, which meant father of the multitudes, for he is the father of many nations, thanks to a lot of raping, of course. And God makes a covenant with him, again, and tells him, yes, he will give him and his descendants all the land of Canaan. Again, he's already done that, like how many times now, but he this time he has a condition. Every male child will be circumcised. Every 8-day-old boy is to be circumcised, no matter if he be born in the house of Abram or purchased from another. Once he's 8 days old, God wants his foreskin. He needs the skin of everybody's penis to show their acceptance of his covenant. And anyone with his penis intact shall be seen as a breaker of the covenant and be shunned by his people. If a man today wanted to collect baby foreskins, like thousands of them, I think he'd be considered just a mite odd, to say the least, bordering on pedophilia even. And one has to ask, why foreskins? Why any bodily part, for that matter? Wouldn't just praying to him be enough? Praising him loudly every day? Why does he need bits of boys' penises? And of course, once again, women don't count. I mean, God doesn't want any vagina bits. But it gets worse. God says, as for Sarai, thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. Okay, another name change. Sarai meant princess, but Sarah means something like the mother of nations. But of course, she's barren, she can't conceive, so that's a bit of a strange name, right? No. For God also says, I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Yes, 90-year-old Sarah will have a son. He will be called Isaac. Again, God chooses the name. The parents have no say in it. And he will make a covenant with Isaac. There he goes again with the covenant thing. God really, really likes covenants. But hang on a minute here. God makes Sarai, who henceforth shall be Sarah, fertile, so now she can have children, Praise the Lord! But if God can make her fertile now, why didn't he do it years before? Save all that nasty business with poor Hagar. Let Abram's wife do the baby production rather than the unfortunate slave girl. And just how much baby producing is a 90-year-old woman going to do? For that matter, Abraham is coming up to a century old, so one might suppose his abilities in the baby-making department could be a bit, rusty, to say the least. Unless, of course, God gives him some heavenly Viagra. Anyway, Abraham sets about slicing off foreskins of every penis he can get his hands on, literally, including his own. So God not only gets baby foreskins, but everybody else's as well to start his foreskin collection. That's a bit weird. Anyway, after a while, the Lord once again appears to Abraham, but this time he seems to become a trio. 3 men turn up, and Abraham recognizes him as the Lord. Whatever. But he mention Sarah having a child, and she laughs at the idea, saying, "After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being all old also?" Now, what is going on here? God has already told them they will have a son. He's even picked a name for the kid, yet Sarah reacts like it's the first time she's heard of it. The Bible really needs a good editor. When the Lord, whichever one of the trio he actually is, tells her nothing is too hard for him to do, so why did she laugh? She denies it, realizing, she may have just pissed off God. But he says, "Nay, but thou didst laugh." Lucky for her, God isn't in smiting mode. Well, at least not yet, but that's not too far away. God has plenty of smite left in him, regardless of his promise never to smite again, as some unfortunate townspeople will soon discover to their cost. In fact, he looks towards Sodom, and he wonders if he should hide from Abraham the thing he is about to do. And what would that be that perhaps Abraham might not approve of? Well, God is going to cause mass genocide. Again, not content with having flooded all but 8 of the entire population of the world out of existence a few chapters back, he is now going to obliterate a couple of cities if they fail a test he has planned. The sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is apparently very grievous, but we don't get any details. So he will go down and see for himself what is going on down there. Now, you might think God, being omnipotent, would already know everything, but apparently he has to actually go down and look, just like everybody else. Remember, he also had to come down and look at the Tower of Babel as well. Now, 2 of the trio, the non-God pair, presumably angels in disguise, they head down towards the city. But Abraham stood before the Lord, and obviously somewhat troubled by what he has guessed is going to happen. Abraham, seemingly having just got a bit of very non-biblical decency and honor, he asks God if he will destroy the righteous along with the wicked. Now, really, he should know the answer to that question. Like, remember that big flood thing a while back? The answer is a big yes. But anyway, he says, what if God finds just 50 righteous men in the city? Will he spare it for the sake of those 50? And God says, yes, he will. If he finds 50 righteous men, he will spare all the place for their sake. Now, clearly, Abraham still has his doubts. But instead of simply asking, will God spare the city if there is anybody who isn't wicked in it, he starts a rather ridiculous number game, asking, well, what about 45 righteous people? Will God destroy the city for the lack of 5 people? God says, no, that's okay. 45 righteous people and the city will be spared. No problemo. But Abraham says, what about only 40? What if you find only 40 righteous people? What then? Well, God's fine with that too. But Abraham keeps going. What about only 30 righteous people? What then? Again, God says, yeah, he's okay with 30. But that's not good enough for the suddenly, strongly moral Abraham, wherever that came from, who wants to know about 20 righteous people. And again, God, with great patience, it must be said by this time, politely tells him that for the sake of 20, he will spare the city. But what about 10 people, Abraham asks. What will God do if only 10 righteous people can be found? Now, by this time, God is getting really fed up with this little numbers game. It's like the sort of thing you might find on American television these days. And I can't say I blame him. I will speak yet this once, he says. If 10 shall be found there, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. And having thus made it clear that Abraham had better shut up at that point, the Lord went his way. that still leaves some considerable questions unanswered, though at least we don't have to sit through them actually being asked. But what if there were 9 righteous people? What then? 10 good guys, city is saved. But 9, and too bad, the whole place is toast. Why does 1 less condemn everybody else? Or what if there were 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, or even just 1? Why is 10 the cut-off number? Any less than 10 righteous people, and they just die along with all the sinners. There wasn't much point in their being righteous then, was there? They might just as well have joined in all the sinning, had a good time since they were going up in smoke anyway, if God can't find at least 10 good guys. But not to worry, not to worry. Sodom and Gomorrah are safe. The most evil, depraved, crime-ridden slum on the face of the earth would have at least 10 decent people in it, right? Like people who had no choice but to live there, nowhere else to go, and might detest where they live. Hated all the sin and corruption, never took part in any of it, but for reasons of economy or family, they had to live there. Well, you would think that. That's logical, but no, that's not the way it works in the Bible. Logic has nothing to do with it. Now, 2 angels, obviously in disguise, went to Sodom. And who do they meet sitting in the city gate but our old friend Lot? And he, for some reason, tells them to stay the night in his house and wash their feet. Washing feet was a big thing back then. And they can go on their way the next morning, which they initially decline, but he presses upon them. And eventually they go into his house and he prepares a feast, baking unleavened bread for them. But did he do that for every stranger who walked in the gate? I don't know, but before they can lie down for the night, the men of the city, young and old, all the men of the city, we are told, surrounded Lot's house. They were coming from everywhere. All the people from every quarter, the Bible says, all converge on Lot's dwelling. Now, it isn't said how they knew Lot had visitors after the 2 disguised angels just entered through the city gate. Lot was sitting actually in the gate, and they all pretty much went straight into Lot's house. So, how had word spread across the entire city? And why was everyone flocking to Lot's house in a massive mob? Did that happen every time anyone entered Sodom? Was the house they entered immediately surrounded by a howling mob? It doesn't really make any sense. But anyway, they call out, "We are the men that came into thee." Where are the men, I should say? Where are the men that came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. And by knowing them, they don't mean, shaking hands and exchanging names. No, they mean knowing them in the biblical sense, Won't get into that. So the entire male population, young and old, from every district in the city, want their turn with these 2 travelers in a massive homoerotic gangbang. Obviously, these guys, they didn't get out much. And what did their wives or mothers, have to say about this? Oh, no, sorry, I forgot they were just women, and thus their opinions didn't matter anyway. So, now the entire male population of Sodom is outside crying for the 2 strangers. But Lot, good, upstanding Lot, he's having none of it. Oh, no, there won't be any hanky-panky under his roof. He goes out to the randy mob, and he addresses them, saying, "I pray you, brethren, do not behave so wickedly." And he very decently offers them an alternative to sate their desires. "Behold now, I have 2 daughters, which have not known men. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these 2 men do nothing, for therefore they came under the shadow of my roof." Okay. Now let's just think about this. To protect 2 complete strangers to whom he owes absolutely nothing, he's quite happy to hand over his 2 young virgin daughters, who he is morally bound to protect, to a savage rape mob, which they might be lucky to survive. As a loving father figure, Lot is really a total failure. Though as a great friend to complete strangers, well, he's outstanding. However, the 2 angels come to the rescue of Lot's daughters, since he clearly isn't going to lift a finger to protect them himself, and they smote the men who were at the door with blindness, both small and great. Then they tell Lot to gather his relatives and leave the city, for the Lord has sent them to destroy it. Are they perhaps the 2 guys who were part of the trio earlier? I thought the Lord himself personally was going to check out the city, but obviously he sent these 2 sidekicks instead. Now, since the angels were looking for righteous men in Sodom, and they are warning Lot to gather his people and get out while he can, they must regard him as a righteous man, a man who is willing without the slightest hesitation to offer his own daughters to be raped by a sex-hungry mob to save a couple of strangers he'd just met. frankly, I wouldn't really trust their judgment about what constituted righteous men. Lot tries to warn all his relatives, but some of them think he's just having them on. Angels are coming to destroy the city. Yeah, sure they are. What were you drinking? Sort of thing. But the next morning the angels tell Lot to hasten, telling him, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. But they still can't get him moving. So they lay hold of him, his wife, and his 2 daughters, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. The Lord says unto Lot, Escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay now in all of the plain, but escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. So Lot and family head for the city of Zoar, and the Lord lets go some mighty justice upon the wicked, or at least, well, his version of it, which is just plain old genocide. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire, and he overthrew those cities and all of the plain and all the inhabitants of those cities and that which grew upon the ground. Now, what had Gomorrah done to be wiped off the face of the map? All the wickedness we've heard about was in Sodom. We've heard nothing bad about Gomorrah. Did they also sexually attack anybody who walked through the gate? And are we to believe that every single man in Sodom was a lust-filled rapist? What about the women? God wanted to find righteous men, so we must assume that the women, as usual in the Bible, were totally unimportant. So if the city had been full of saintly women, it would have made no difference. And what about children? Were the children all wicked? Were the gangs of preteen thugs roaming the streets, ready to assault anyone who came through the city gate? And unborn babies, still in the womb, were they wicked too? I suppose they must have been, since God killed them too. God kills every living thing, human and animal, and even the plants that grow upon the plain, in an orgy of death and destruction that slaughters evil and innocent alike, and then turns Lot's wife into a pillar of salt because she happened to glance back. She glanced back at the cataclysmic destruction going on behind her, as anybody would. Was that a crime worthy of death? But God thought it was. She had dared not to do what he said. So too bad, Mrs. Lot, whatever your name was. You're a pillar of salt because you didn't do what the God who loves and cares for you told you to do. Naughty, naughty Mrs. Lot. You're a naughty, naughty girl. So there we leave the Bible for the moment, with Abraham the next morning going to the place where he stood before the Lord playing 20 questions with numbers, and he looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. Once again, we see the justice, the fair play, the compassion, and the logic of the Bible. When in doubt, well, kill everything. That way you know you got the evildoers. Works every time. I see it as actually insulting to God. The way human behavior, and not very nice human behavior, is given to God in the Bible. Jealousy, anger, revenge, sudden likes or dislikes, cruelty, killing often for no reason. These are human attributes, which a great spiritual being would hardly possess. That in itself shows the hand of man, not God, in the writing of the Bible. Now, I would challenge anyone to seriously say otherwise, and even find the slightest moral justification for any of that. Tell me how, a loving, caring, kindly God will slaughter innocent people willy-nilly, kill someone just because they happen to glance over their shoulder. Justify that. I think you'll have a job.